Okay, right. Okay, good evening, everyone. Let me know if you can hear me because I'm using my laptop this evening. Yeah, all good. Okay. Let's begin with a rather well-known Rashi. Perek Vov, Posuk, Yud Beis. So there is this dialogue that continues through the beginning of Parshas Va'era between Hashem and Moshe Rabbeinu, where Hashem says a number of times to Moshe, it's time. Vaydaber al Parei melech Mitzrayim, Vaydaber Moshe, Posuk Yud Beis, Lifnei Hashem Limara. Moshe says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hein b'nei Yisrael lo shomu elai. B'nei Yisrael aren't listening. Ve'eich yishmo'eni Faroi v'ani rasol saim. How on earth is Paro going to listen to me? V'ani rasol saim. I've got this speech impediment anyway. Simple pshat, right? How is it possible that if already the Bnei Yisrael aren't listening to me, so how is Paro going to? And Rashi says here one line, this is a kal v'chomer, straightforward kal v'chomer. Already the Bnei Yisrael aren't listening, how on earth is Paro going to listen? Now, the problem here is obvious. It's asked by the Sifsei Chachomim, but it's immediately obvious when you learn this Rashi, and that is, the basic principles of a kal v'chomer don't work here, right? Because we know why Bnei Yisrael weren't going to listen, because the Torah tells us 3 psukim or 4 psukim earlier, by Posuk Tes. Vaydaber Moshe kein el Bnei Yisrael, v'lo shomu el Moshe. They didn't listen. Kotzer Ruach, right? Kotzer Ruach and me'avodah kosher. Why didn't they listen? Because they were of shortness of breath. They were completely worn out. So we have to come back to understanding exactly what that word means. Rashi goes into detail here about someone who is in distress and is in an incredibly pressured situation, the anguish that they feel so that they cannot breathe properly. And that is what Kotzer Ruach is, shortness of breath. Now, if that's the case, then it's not a kal v'chomer, because they didn't listen. They had a reason they didn't listen, whereas Paro is no Kotzer Ruach. So maybe he would listen. Who says the Paro is not going to listen, right? That's the basic question on this Rashi. The Sifsei Chachomim asked this question, and for approximately probably at least 800 years, people have struggled with this question on understanding what exactly this kal v'chomer is. I'd like to take you through an approach towards this by Rav Shach. Rav Shach, Zichrono Livrocha, says the following thing in Sefer Machshavas Musa. He says like this. He says we have to begin solving this, if you like, with another question. And that question is, why is it that, how are we to understand the contradiction here, right? Here it says they didn't listen to Moshe Rabbeinu, right? It seems like they didn't believe, right? They said, Lo shama Moshe, Kotzer Ruach. Whereas we learned at the end of last week's Parsha, towards the end, Perek Dalad, Posuk Lamed Aleph, so the end of Parshas Shemos, what does it say? It says, Vayamein ha'om. They believed. He comes to them, he tells them what's going on, Vayamein ha'om, and the people believe. So what has changed? They believe they're on the pathway towards understanding that this is going to be the moment of Geula, and all of a sudden everything changes. Lo shamu el Moshe. They can't hear anymore. They can't listen anymore. Kotzer Ruach. Now, he quotes the Sefer Or Yahel, who says like this: that what we see is that a person can be in a situation, or people generally can have a situation where two entire opposites can exist within them. So, for example, you can have Vayamein ha'om, that they believe it's going to happen, and nevertheless, Lo shamu el Moshe, they don't listen. The idea, as he puts it, is ma'aminim ve'einam ma'aminim ke'echad. They believe and they don't believe in exactly the same time. He brings a pasuk in Mishlei. The pasuk in Mishlei says, Shomayim lorum v'oretz la'omek. The Shomayim, we know where that is. How far away that is up there. We know how deep the earth goes underground, right? But leiv malachim ein cheker. But the heart of kings, there's no way of discerning. What are the malachim? There are Mefarshim explain the leiv malachim here, based on Kol Yisrael b'nei malachim, whom all of Yisrael are considered to be the princes. The idea of malachim are people generally, that you cannot understand the depths of the human heart, right? There is a limit. There is a gvul. There's a limit in somewhere to the heavens. There is a limit somewhere to the earth, right? To the earth. But in a person, you can have completely contradictory emotions. So you can have someone, for example, who is at the same time fully believing, completely there, complete emunah, and at the same time, the situation, the circumstances of Kotzer Ruach, where the distress and pain that's caused in the moment means they can't hear it. They just cannot hear the message they need to hear at that moment. So that, he says, that is what Kotzer Ruach is. Kotzer Ruach is when you have, take a seat. Kotzer Ruach is shortness, literally shortness of breath. What it really means is a situation that a person is in whereby they cannot hear something. They cannot even hear it at all. And he says, let's now consider the story with Paro himself. Yeah, a little bit later on in the Parsha, Perek Zayin, Posuk Tesvav, Leichel Paro Baboker. Moshe Rabbeinu was told, you want to encounter Paro, you know where you'll find him. You will find him famously. Hinei Yotzei HaMaimo. He is down by the Nile, V'nitzav Tolek Rosei, etc., etc. Why is he down in the Nile? As we know, because he wanted to present himself as a god, and therefore he used to relieve himself in the Nile every morning, so no one would know that he functioned like normal flesh and blood. Okay. Now, the problem is the one of the most famous psukim in Nach, almost, is in the Haftarah for this week's parsha. Okay, and that is the Haftarah is in Yechezkel. Yeah, and you have this posuk where Paro himself says, right? It's the third. It's post Perek Tes posuk Gimel in the Haftarah. Sorry for jumping around a little bit. In as they take it from Yechezkel. Daber v'omar tofem Hashem Elokim hineni olecha Paro melech Mitzrayim. I'm coming for you. Paro melech Mitzrayim, Hatanim Hagodol, the great serpent, however you translate the word Tanim, Horovetz Besochya Orov, crouching amongst his river. Asher Omar, who says, Li Ya'ori, V'ani Asisini. To me is the river, I made that river. Paro would declare that he was a god and he made the Nile himself. So the question is that, just think for a second. Paro is going down to the river. He's engaged in this complete facade, this complete joke. Every single morning, he goes down to the river, is a normal human being. He gets out of the river, sits in his palace and said, I make the river. Li Ya'ori. It's a joke. He says, there's no greater, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's just it's just a ridiculous claim that he is rehearsing every single day the same spiel, the same deception. So the point is that you can have that. Is that you can have a situation. It's like he uses the phrase that Chazal use, knowing the Creator and yet rebelling at the same time, right? Paro knows exactly what's going on, and at the same time, he's in a situation where he cannot even hear the emes, he cannot even hear the truth. Okay, and what happens is that a person can be in a situation where they know the truth on an intellectual level, but yet cannot hear that truth because in the particular circumstances and situation of their own rebellion as such, that takes over. Okay, that takes over. And what he says is that this is what really Kotzer Ruach is. It's not just the shortness of breath in the sense that the person is in this pain and distress, is that their whole world, their whole spirit becomes minimized so that they cannot see beyond the deception that they have managed to create around themselves, which is what Paro himself is living. That's the life he's living. He's living this life of every single day, every single day being completely human, and every single day pretending he is a god. And he says like this: with this we can understand what the Kal V'chomer is. So the Kal V'chomer, the question was, how is that Kal V'chomer? If Bnei Yisrael are not listening to Moshe Rabbeinu, that's because they are Kotzer Ruach. They're shortness of breath. Paro is not Kotzer Ruach. Why should maybe he will listen? No. So the answer is like this: is that Paro himself, we know that Hashem hardens his heart. Yeah. When they asked Paro, and Paro's asked this question, and the people would ask him, for example, how it's possible to say that he created the river when he didn't do so. Okay, he would hear the words, but it wouldn't enter his mind at all. Okay, because his entire process, ability to hear things is limited in that way. And therefore, words will have zero effect on him. This was the situation that Bnei Yisrael themselves were in, right? They were in a position of Vaya Amein Ha'om. They believed, of course they believed. But the particular circumstances, the tichbat ha'avoda al ha'anoshim, the extra work they had to do, the burden itself, created a situation of Kotzer Ruach. It doesn't matter how many times they would be told the Geula is at the doorway, you are about to be redeemed, they would not be able to hear it, they would not be able to process it. So the Kal V'chomer is like this. Bnei Yisrael, they were, as the Parsha begins, Bnei Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, they came from this tremendous lineage. They understood, they knew, they had this Masorah passed down through the generations, they would be redeemed, it would happen all the way from the time of Avraham Avinu, they knew it was going to happen, yet they could not hear because their capability to hear had become limited.
Hey Miriam, can you hear me now?
Because of the whole, because of the fact that they were under a situation, in a situation where they were limited as a result of the slavery they were undergoing. Kal v'chomer Paro, whose spirit was limited from a long time before that. His ability, his ruach, was kotzar from a long time before because of the illusion that he had created around himself. And therefore, if already the Bnei Yisrael, who had a greater chance to hear the message, yet couldn't because of the Kotzer Ruach, how much more so Paro, whose ruach is much smaller. He is minimized to a much greater extent than Bnei Yisrael, to the extent that he can trick himself and others in this way. And that is the essence of the Kal V'chomer. So this idea, which I think is a very, very powerful idea, it's a tremendous insight into human nature, because at the heart of it is that Paro is living a completely delusional life. And to see and hear the emes, we have to be attuned to it. It doesn't matter how many times that emes is thrown at us. Unless we have the ability to hear it, it will not go in. It will not make a difference. Now, part of what we see if we take this further in the Parsha is we look towards what the solution potentially is for it. And we look at the very agents of the Geula. We look at Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron HaKohen. And one thing we need to understand is that what is highlighted, the Torah highlights and goes to great lengths really to highlight before the onset of the Makkos, is the partnership that they're involved in. If you look at Perek Vov, Pasuk Vov, we have the reversal of the names, right? Yeah. Who are in the Moshe? Someone Rashi says they were the same. Yesh Makomer Shemakdim Aaron the Moshe. Yesh Makomer Shemakdim Moshe Aaron. Sometimes you have Moshe for Aaron, sometimes you have Aaron for Moshe. Lo Malachasha Shkulin Ke'echod. That they are equal. Now, in fact, the vast majority of times it's Moshe then Aaron. Occasionally, very occasionally, it's Aaron then Moshe. But the message is that they are equal. They are Shkulin Ke'echod. There is a medrash which brings this out very powerfully. Not just the fact that they were shkulin ke'echod. That's one level. One level is that they were equal. They were both at the same level spiritually. The medrash in Shmos Rabbah says that, how do we know, for example, we know that Moshe acted as a dayan towards Paro. How do we know Aaron did? The answer is El Moshe vel Aaron. They both acted as dayanim. How do we know that Moshe says, we know that Moshe said his words and was unafraid. Aaron as well was unafraid. The Medrash goes through a number of ways in which they were equal and they both shared the burden, shared the task in this way. The Medrash Shir Shirim Rabbah, which also expounds on the same idea, goes into even more detail about this in the leadership that they excelled in, brings a statement of Rabbi Chanina Bar Papa, beautiful words, who says, Baruch HaMochkoim, blessed is Hashem shebochar b'shnei achim ho'ela, who chose these two brothers, shelo nivru elo l'Torah u'lechvoden shel Yisrael. They were created for the Torah and for the honor of Klal Yisrael. But they acted in this tremendous harmony, and yet they also complemented each other. So the Medrash is another Medrash which says like this. It's a Medrash Tanchuma. It brings a pasuk in Tehillim. Chesed ve'emes nifkashu, truth and kindness meet or met. Tzedek v'shalom nishku, which means justice and peace kiss. They meet together at in a sense of closeness. What does this refer to? Says the Medrash. Chesed ze Aaron. Chesed is Aaron. Shneimel, the pasuk says, He's described in the end of Devarim as the man of Chesed, the person of Chesed. Ve'emes ze Moshe. How do you know emes is Moshe? B'chol beisi ne'emonu. He is faithful. He is the one who's the truth. He represents truth. He represents truth. That is Chesed ve'emes nifgashu. And Tzedek v'sholom nishku. Tzedek is Moshe Rabbeinu. Shnemat tzidkas Hashem asa. Righteousness, justice. He is the mechokeik, the one who delivers the Torah, the law in that way. Shalom is Aaron, as it says, b'shalom of Mishra halachitim, posuk in Malachi, right? The idea that he carries shalom, peace in that way. So what you see from this medrash is that in order for the Geula to be delivered, there is a need for both Moshe and Aaron to be present and to complement each other, in the sense that Aaron is pure and pure chesed, that's his inner nature in every way. Chesed, shalom, bringing peace. We know that's what Aaron the Kohen does. Moshe Rabbeinu represents tzedek. Moshe Rabbeinu represents emes, truth, justice. And the two of them together, that is the only way the Geula can come about. Because without that method and manner in which they complement each other, there is no way for the Geula to come about. There is no way for the leadership to be delivered in the best possible way. Okay, Moshe Rabbeinu has to come to this realization himself, and you see that the Kli Yakar brings this out. The very first, I think it's the first Kli Yakar on the Parsha. If you're following, he says the Kli Yakar brings this out. I think in a wonderful way. He picks up on the fact that the Torah says, as other Mefarshim do, it says Vayomer Elokim el Moshe, Vayomer Elov ani Hashem. What's the Elov? Right here, Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe, what's Elov? Right? What's Elov? Says the Kli Yakar like this. He says the word Elov seems to be superfluous. It's already mentioned the name of Moshe Rabbeinu. So he says that we have to go back to the naming of Moshe himself. Why was he called Moshe and not Moshe? We mentioned this last week. He should be called Moshrui, the one who was drawn from the water. Shenimshach mimayim. Lefisha Moshe or Nimshah. Lefisha Moshe, he says like this. Lefisha Moshe loshan hove. It's the current. It's the present tense. He is the one who has to draw them out, physically draw them out, forcefully draw them out from the Golus, from the exile. So Hashem is saying to him like this: Moshe, all you have to do is check your own name. You have your doubts whether you will be able to do this. That was the end of Parsha Shmos. You have your doubts. You're not sure. Will you be able to deliver this? Is this going to happen? They're not listening to me. He goes to Hashem and he says it's not working. So Hashem says to him, you would never say, Lama zeh shelachtoni. Why is this you would have sent me if you would have understood Elov, right? By Daber Elokim el Moshe, by Yomer Elov ani Hashem. Look at your own name. Look at yourself. Look at what you're called. You have the capability to do this. You have the ability to do it through we can add based on what we've said, that through the adherence to emes that you have, the ability to deliver that emes, that's why you are in this world. You have the facility to do it, and you should never doubt your own abilities in order to do so, in order to do this and be able to deliver it in this way. There are those who suggest, as a result of this, I still brought in the name of a Sefer called Kilas Yitzchak, that the complementary nature here is the fact that Aaron, it comes to him naturally, whereas Moshe Rabbeinu has to somehow overcome that in himself. In other words, he has to work on it himself to get there, to get to that place. The idea that to Aaron HaKohen, the chesed is right there immediately. Moshe Rabbeinu, at some level, at his level, has to work on it in order to build himself to that. There is more to say on that area. It's a topic which is we haven't got time to go into and exactly what that means. But either way, it means that in a leadership sense, is we mentioned that in order to see and hear that emes, a person has to be attuned to it. It also has to be delivered in the right way. So both of them work together in tandem. Now, when we look at the altered reality, this altered reality that Paro lives within, this idea of Li Ori Vania Sisiu, the idea that Paro can stand there and say that I created the river, I formed the river. And linked closely to that is the whole idea, which almost like overshadows the whole parsha, which is the question of Bechira. Many we've spoken about this in the past. Many we've discussed this. What is the idea? How can his Bechira be removed? How can his free will be removed? What is it that Paro? What is the world of Paro? How does he? Where does he live in? What does he live in that he can live in this deluded existence? Now, Rav Moshe Shapiro says like this. He has a beautiful piece here, where he explains something about the, if you like, the paradox and the function of what Mitzrayim is, what Paro is, and how that relates to how we are meant to look at the world itself, and how we are meant to ourselves have, if you like, an altered reality of the world as a result of the events in this week's parsha, and the Yetzias Mitzrayim in general. So he asks a basic question. If you go back to the beginning of creation, so we ask ourselves, why do we have to know these details, all the details that are spelled out in such a cryptic way in the first perek of Bereshis, right? Why is it there? Why do we need to know that the world was desolate? What does it mean that what was the creation of light? We don't understand it anyway. So why is it, what it really means? So what is the Torah telling us? And he says the clearest and easiest and most straightforward way of understanding it is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to understand that we are created within a world that we are able to affect, that we are able ourselves to be miyatzer. We have a glimpse into creation itself, into the Yetzirah, in the process of formation, to understand that just as the world itself is desolate, it begins as tohu vavohu, and yet it itself somehow, through Hashem's word, takes form and shape, so to us, being B'Tselem Elokim, we have this overriding ability and mission to take things in the world that are unformed, that are not right, and somehow give it form, make it work, make it better in that way. And he says that this is the essence of the different approaches, if you like, of the Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara. They're both the same in the sense they're both with the word Yetzer. They're both word about miyatzer, to form something. That's what they do. They both refer to the formation of good and evil. They both refer to formation, just one refers to the formation of goodness and one refers to the formation of evil. And essentially, the position that we are in is we are between the two. We are constantly shifting between the two, the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara, one directing us in the direction of shaping things in a good way, and one directing us in a way of shaping things in a negative way, right? Obviously, they're both within us, right? We have that dilemma, that's Bechira, that's free choice. That is the struggle that we have within ourselves. How are we going to give form to the creation itself, to this world? What are we going to do in order to do this? The point is that everything stems from how we perceive that world, the world we live within. Do we perceive the world in such a way where we can understand that we have a role to reach higher, to do something that will change the world in a positive way? Or are we simply in the negative all the time? Are we within the Yetzer Hara itself? And he says that Mitzrayim, we know Mitzrayim is always the limitations, yeah? Meitzar is always the limitations, right? So Mitzrayim essentially is the Yetzer Hara. That's what Mitzrayim is, right? Because the when Paro says Li Ya'ori, right, the river is mine and I created the river, it's not actually, he's not a lunatic. He's not saying this because he is raging in some way and he doesn't understand. He's completely delusional. On the contrary, says Rav Moshe Shapiro, if we're honest with ourselves, we often do this ourselves. We often do the same thing, yeah? To say I am the river and I created the river is saying that my existence is absolute. There is nothing beyond me. That's it. I'm in charge. There is nothing else. There is just me. And I am in complete control. Everything is about me. Everything is about my existence. There is nothing beyond my existence. And therefore I am the river, because there is nothing else other than what I perceive and what I can see and what I can do. There is no existence out there beyond me. So the point is that if we live a life where we cannot conceive of anything beyond and higher and living in a higher existence to which we can strive towards, it's a very short step to say, well, I must have made the world because I'm the only thing that exists. I'm the only thing that matters in the world. So it must be that I actually, in some sense, obviously he knew that he was born and he would die, but there's nothing beyond him itself. This is not an easy thing to do, he says. It's not an easy thing to rise above this. It's not an easy thing because we are constantly caught with that dilemma within ourselves. Is there anything else, or is it just me? Should I just think about myself, or should I think about something higher at the same time? Now, in fact, he brings a pasuk in Koheles, Ki holech ha'odam el beis olamai. Everyone goes ultimately to the house. Beis olamai is the house that we built. That's how it is. We go to the house that we built in this world. That is the reality of the nature of our existence. With this, he says, and I don't have time to go into this in great detail, just give you a brief kind of overview of what he says, because it's such a powerful idea. He says that is why you have so much to do with kishuf and demons, shadim, all bound up within Mitzrayim. Belatehem and Belahatehem, there are different meanings to them, the demons and sorcery, and they try and do all the witchcraft and everything else. Why? Because effectively, there is no real existence to these things. Could be following the line of the Rambam, which says that it's all kind of sleight of hand. That's the Rambam's perspective. But they exist in the sense that as long as they are deceiving people, then they exist. Their existence is a deception. That is the whole nature of these things, right? So he brings, for example, the Gemara says kashofim is a mixture of two words. Kachash is to contradict, to deny, and the kashafim, the fim at the end, if you like, is the pamalia, which means the pamalia shalmala, the heavenly entourage. It denies the existence of Hashem himself. That is what it is. That's what sorcery it is. The word shade, which means a demon, shin dalad means a demon, right? You will see immediately is closely related to lahavdil, the Shem Hashem mentioned at the beginning of the parsha, shin dalad yud, right? Shin dalad yud, right? What is shin? Yeah, shin shakai. It means HaKadosh Baruch Hu has complete control, right? There is within him the ability and facility to arrange everything. There is the idea of the word is related to mishaded. Mishaded means to align nature. Hashem himself aligns nature. In some way, the sorcery and the demons that exist within, they are all part of this distorted perception and the ability of a person who believes that they themselves created the river. They themselves created the river. They also have within all of their, all this sorcery and magic is all there within that same kind of conceptual framework that they are living within. What are we tasked on doing? I took you out of Mitzrayim. The idea being, and this is why he says we reinforce this again and again and again, is that we reinforce the idea that we leave Mitzrayim, Hashem takes us out of Mitzrayim to live on that higher existence. The Shem Havaya, the idea of the Shem Havaya, that becomes known, that's the beginning of the parsha, right? Becomes known, if you like, to us through Yetzias Mitzrayim itself. Because what is the revelation of the name of this Shem Havaya, the name of the existence of Hashem himself? That name, that Shem Hashem comes about, if you like, or it's understood to us. It's understood to us when this notion of Hashem directing events, the idea that we can follow our Yetzer Tov. We don't have to go in the direction of continuous Ra, which is the worldview of Paro. We have the ability to rise above it. That's what it is. That's what it is. You look, he says, at the very first of the Makkos, Dam, because this brings it out so powerfully. You have a situation, as Chazal say, where you can have one side of a cup. And if a Jew is drinking one side, we know the Medrash, right? It's water, and for the Mitzri, it's blood. What does that mean? What does that mean? It means that they're both looking at the same physical reality. It's the same cup of water. And one sees and drinks and feels and experiences blood, and the other person experiences water, because everything depends on your perception of how you look at the world. Everything depends. That's the message there. It also means it was also half off. It's not the point. The point is that the deeper idea, the message behind it is that when we understand that everything, we understand from that everything depends on how HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides to run the world. If Hashem decides that for the Mitzri it's going to be blood and for the Jew it's going to be water, that is what happens. That is what will transpire. When we remind ourselves every day, as we do at least twice a day, we remind ourselves that we left Mitzrayim. This helps us understand why that we reinforce that so powerfully in our tefillas. The bracha after the first bracha after the Shema, right? Emes v'emunah, the whole idea, go through the whole idea of what Yetzias Mitzrayim really was. We understand that through Yetzias Mitzrayim, we are able to remove ourselves from that Kotzer Ruach of Paro. The Paro is living. Paro's Kotzer Ruach is how we began the shir. Paro's Kotzer Ruach is a shortness of breath. That is a delusional view of the world. It's an altered reality of the world. It's a reality that can lead him to say, Li Ya'ori v'ani asisiu. I made the river. I mean, you obviously didn't make the river, but no, you believe you see nothing else. If you see nothing else, you will eventually get to that position where you believe you actually created the river. And it's that world which has within it the kashofim and the demons and the sorcery and everything else that goes along with everything that Mitzrayim stands for. Bnei Yisrael suffered from Kotzer Ruach, from shortness of breath, because of the slavery, because of the difficulty, the pain they're in. Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron HaKohen have to do through that marrying of Chesed and Emes is to give them the ability to rise above it, to become attuned to something that is of ruchnias, that is truly meaningful, that is truly spiritual, and doesn't belong in the world of Mitzrayim. And that's the real Yetzias Mitzrayim. That's the real process that is that goes through here. It's the removal of the Kotzer Ruach, and the Kotzer Ruach which exists within all of us, and we have to remain able to lift ourselves above that. So that's really the message of the parsha. So we're going to thank you all for listening. We're going to move on to the other topic that we're going to try and look at this evening.